bravery, discipline, integrity, confidence, awareness, and competence. If you hear these words, what do you think about?
Got a warrior.
About a warrior.
Nice.
So if you think about business owners, every day, these are modern day warriors going out every day,
Exactly.
trying to make a living, excel, and do the best that they can for themselves and their families and everybody that relies on them, right? Their employees and the whole ecosystem that they support. Well, today we have a special guest who could talk a thing or two about being the modern day warrior. And before we get him on, I want to take you back to high school. Now, I'm a little bit older than you.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to go back to the early 1990s.
Okay.
And if you think of Brazil back then, what do you think about it? For me, at that time, somebody said Brazil, I think of Pele, right? Everybody knows him.
Ronaldo.
Yeah. That Ronaldo came later, but Pele back in the early 90s, right? You're giving away your age.
Well, my age would be more Ronaldinho than Ronaldo. But.
Right. But, for us, and I'm in my late 40s. So Pele, and then, of course, the immortal, the legend, Ayrton Senna, the Formula One champion. And then the third thing is the birth of the modern day UFC or the mixed martial arts. I remember being in high school and I watched these monsters go up against this little guy who looked like he was wearing like pajamas. He came in and he would beat these guys. And I was like, wow, it's like magic. What is going on here? And that was, of course, modern day Jiu-Jitsu. Everybody knows it today, but back then we had no idea what it was. Well, our guest today was actually in Brazil and is directly connected to that entire movement. And so, Professor Leo Xavier, talk to us about what it was like, or tell us your story of when you got started with Jiu-Jitsu and being in Brazil and being connected directly to the source itself.
All right, guys, great to be here with you guys. Thanks for having me. And Avo, it sounds like you ready for almost your promotion in Jiu-Jitsu already, for a first promotion. You definitely did your homework, and you're right. Pelé was an icon in Brazil. Ayrton Senna was another icon, worldwide legend. But between those two guys, there was a guy that became national hero in Brazil, was a very, quote, weak physically. We're going to talk about it. Small, but he revolutionized and became the #1 athlete, and nobody knows about it. Helio Gracie. And you're right, since 15 years old, I spent a lot of time with the Gracies, and I became assistant instructor at the headquarters in Brazil, which is the Mecca of Jiu-Jitsu, the birthplace of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And it transformed my life, in many, many ways. And it's connected to everything in life. And when we talked about business, in order for you to become a great businessman, you have to treat business as warfare. You have to be sharp. You have to be sensitive to change. You have to have intuition. You have to have you have to go for the kill when it's time. You have to take the foot out of the gas pedal and be patient when it's time to be patient. So there's a lot to do. I feel like the elements and principles that lead someone to succeed in a fight are the same ones that lead someone to succeed in business and in life.
Now, you mentioned the parallels between running a business and being a warrior. A lot of MBA programs, they make The Art of War by Sun Tzu mandatory reading. And there's a lot of things that apply. Obviously, I mentioned some of the words here. Now, go back to when you were in Brazil training. What was it like in those days, talking about some of the, the discipline, the showing up every day, the commitment? What was it like coming up the ranks there?
Yes, one thing that's very clear, trying to make as short as I can, is a filter. Who have what it takes and who's willing to put the work to get to what it needs to be, stays. If you don't, you don't. You get out. So it's similar than a show. There's a show that I like, The Cut, which is about Navy SEALs team training, Navy SEAL Team 6 training, getting the ones that don't belong there out of there. So to stay, you have to demonstrate discipline, resilience, work ethic, ability to adapt, ability to operate during crisis. And of course, those things are ingrained over time. And that's what we're learning as martial artists. But you have to be disciplined, build a good routine. You cannot want to perform better the next day and have poor routine, no discipline. You cannot put water in the Ferrari's tank and want the Ferrari to operate properly. So you have to have the best fuel. You have to sleep well. You have to have discipline. You have to have heart. You have to have courage. When we talked about courage to know how to lose, courage to do it again, courage to come back, courage to face the obstacles. So many of the traits of the modern day warrior, they help in a fight, and they help in business in everyday life. Up today, in Japan, business is treated as warfare. And many of the big CEOs of the main companies still train martial arts before the business day to make sure they continue to be sharp. You mentioned The Art of War. The book is a legendary book. And people read, even though they don't know how to fight, somehow they're trying to learn the concepts and principles of a warrior so they can strive to live a life of excellence, which will reflect in business, in your relationships, in your friendships, in everything you do.
Yeah, you mentioned, preparing for the war. So a lot of times people think you just show up to work and you do things, but there's a lot of things that have to be done ahead of time to prepare, right? So, and I think I've heard you talk about this before. It's not just learning the techniques in jiu-jitsu. There's a whole jiu-jitsu lifestyle. There's a whole philosophy. There's a whole taking care of your body. Tell us a little bit more about that concept of not, everything you do outside of the dojo, outside of the techniques.
Yes, we're talking about strategy, right? We're talking about gathering our tools. When you go record a podcast, we need all the members who is going to participate to show up. We need the proper equipment. We need timing. So it's the same. So the day before, when you're doing a world-class training camp, you have to hydrate well. You have to rest well. You have to prepare your mind for the battles or the stress that you're going to put in. You have to treat yourself at your best in every way. So at the time you are performing, you reach your full potential, and you always operate at your full potential. Anything but that, you're wasting. There's a gap. Somehow this has to be called failure. Even though it should not be negative, but when I show up to training dehydrated, that's a failure. I was irresponsible. I missed. If I miss the timing of the training where the best training partners are going to be there, and I show up when nobody's at the dojo, I missed the boat. So we're talking about gathering the tools. We're talking about strategy. We're talking about mindset. We're talking about a plan and executing, applying. So all this is connected to everything in life. If you don't have a plan, if you don't have a strategy, if you don't have tools, you're not going to reach the full result.
Yeah, and so really got to put in the time and be committed to it like the warrior. And obviously the lessons in jiu-jitsu where you're dealing with things that might be unfamiliar, but you rely on the skill sets to adapt and not panic. And as business owners, one of the biggest events in our lifetime took place a couple of years ago, this whole COVID thing, right? And in your particular case, you're also a business owner. You run a school, and it impacted you as well, where all of a sudden COVID comes down and everybody stops showing up to the dojo. It creates, new challenges that you have to overcome. Tell us a little bit about how you used the jiu-jitsu lifestyle, your jiu-jitsu technique, the way you live your life to deal with that particular challenge as a business owner.
That's another great question. And I have to touch a little bit on another podcast that I done. And the guy asked me, I said, man, I was doing the pandemic. He invited me for a live. And he said, how are you living? How are you dealing without jiu-jitsu, without training jiu-jitsu? And I look at the guy. It was strange because naturally I look and say, what do you mean? Man, how are you living without training jiu-jitsu? I said, I'm not without training jiu-jitsu. Oh, but we're in a lockdown. I said, my friend, I'm applying jiu-jitsu every day. I wake up. I'm grateful. I practice breathing exercise. I do primal movements. I practice visualization so I can manifest when things go back to normal. I practice visualization. I practice patience. I practice operating, doing Christ, how to turn a challenge, overcome a challenge and turn into opportunity. So these are traits of the modern day warrior. So I was not sitting still. And I told him, what's funny, because I said, man, I don't treat jiu-jitsu like most people treat nowadays. It's not my 6-pack of beer on the way home that I tire myself so I can sleep better. It's part of my life. So if I'm not sparring, right here I'm applying jiu-jitsu right now. I apply jiu-jitsu as a father, as a husband, as a friend, as a business owner. So everything that we're talking about, the mindset of the modern day warrior, is transferred to everyday life. And even someone, let's say, and I'm sure you guys know how to fight, and I don't want to know. I don't want to, please don't show me. But my point is, someone who doesn't know how to physically fight can be operating within the modern day warrior code. And somebody who knows how to fight might not. And I'm knowing you guys, I know that you're both modern day warriors. So not necessarily the ability to beat somebody up makes you a modern day warrior, but the way that you operate, your operational system, the way that you see life, the way that you apply it, everything has to do. So when I was not training during COVID, I was not training sparring with somebody. It was the time that I trained the most. Breathing exercise, stretching, mobility, visualization, running all the possibilities. If things don't go back to normal, what I'm gonna do? Then I start an online course. So being present, grounded, sharp, and capitalize on the opportunities that challenge bring.
Yeah. So talk to us about that. So you just mentioned one of the challenges was the school was shut down, so you adapted and you started the online program.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, was that the jiu-jitsu training that says, okay, I caught myself in this position. I'm not going to panic. I'm going to adapt and I'm going to figure out a path out. So what was that journey like, going from, having everybody show up to the dojo to all of a sudden adapting, going online and continuing the school that way?
Yeah, it was like dealing with the options that I had in my hands. One thing very important is to understand that what cannot be solved, it has already been solved. So it's choosing what is in my control and what is not. So first thing goes to the garbage, what is not in my control. What is in my control? What are my possibilities? Okay, here they are. So one, I have a little small dojo in my house, record videos from there. Or whenever I could drive to the school, record the videos from there. Then I started to organize this and connect with people I have people from all over the world that are part of my online course. And they brought something, and I started learning a new thing. So I enjoy it to get to know something new, reaching other people and serving them, because I realized at the time, not many people who train jiu-jitsu were using jiu-jitsu in the entire life. So the guys not sparring, and they need it. So it was good for me to be able to provide that for them, that escape, that relief, and that service.
Yeah, two things you said I wrote down. One was, forget about things you can't control. Isn't that amazing? We spend so much time worrying about things that are outside of our control when we should just be focusing in on the things we can control and how we react. And, as a parent, all of us are parents here, right. There's, one of the most, I don't want to say frustrating, but the challenging things that we deal with is you want to help your kids, but you realize there's only so much you could do, right? And focusing in on all the things that could go wrong kind of keeps you up at night. But when you give them the skill sets to deal with whatever comes their way, it's one of the most gratifying things. And so you talked about control, but then you also talked about learning. Even someone such as yourself, world-class, 5th degree, black belt in jiu-jitsu, you're still learning things. You never stop learning. And so as a business owner, right, we think we know everything, but oftentimes, we realize that there's so much to learn. And when we open ourselves up to, have mentors, learn from others, we don't limit ourselves. Talk to me a little bit more about, when you reach the level that you've reached, even at your level, do you still seek out mentors?
Oh, of course. So there's one thing now in martial arts that it can be a misconception that everybody's a master, right? So because the guy reach a black belt and call master. So I'm not a master because in Jiu-Jitsu, you should become a coral belt, 7th degree to be called a master. And I'm not, but many people, because of my knowledge, they call me master. And I say, I'd rather be a lifetime apprentice. So I love this. Lifetime student, scholar of the art. Because I don't want to be in a position where I don't have a mentor and where people think that I know everything. I'm just starting. And I like this other saying, every neighbor is your teacher. I'm here right now learning from you guys. Thanks for having me. A great time. I'm learning. So when you close your mind, you think you know everything, is a problem. You're dead. You're walking, but you're dead. So, and I had great mentors. Like one of my number one mentor right now is my idol, Master Rickson Gracie. So, and I'm very blessed to have him as a mentor because for me in Jiu-Jitsu, it's Michael Jordan in basketball. It's like Ayrton Senna in Formula One. So I'm very blessed to have the access and the relationship that I have with him. And he transformed my life and my Jiu-Jitsu to a completely new level.
You know, what's interesting about that, Jack, is in our profession, so with attorneys, you guys do the CLEs,
Right.
continuing education. With me and my certifications, there's courses that I take. But what he's talking about here isn't just taking a certification. He's talking about mentorship. He's talking about being blessed with the knowledge that's being shared. And oftentimes, a lot of business owners, they'll just do the bare minimum because they're just so busy doing everything else, and they don't really seek out mentors. But we know from reading, CEOs have mentors, they have coaches. Everybody's got something or somebody that they go to elevate their game. And Professor, what happens, kind of tying this back to business and martial arts and the warrior here, what happens to the warrior that doesn't keep sharp, that says, okay, I've learned everything, and they stop? What happens to them if they stop it?
Oh man, if you stop, you lose your skills. You become rusty. Because things are changing. No matter we want it or not, everything's in constant change. So if you don't continue to be open-minded and learning and adapting to change and understanding that everything's changing, you're going back.
Yeah. Speaking of changing, I want to kind of talk a little bit about the business of Jiu-Jitsu. Okay. So I talked about when I was in high school, it was this magic thing and it was just starting. And today it seems like I can't go anywhere, any strip mall, shopping center where there isn't a Jiu-Jitsu school pop up. And it's interesting because I talk to other parents that have young children and they're like, oh, I go to this school or that school. And not necessarily because of the school's reputation, but because, oh, it's the closest one to us. But as we know in business, you know, somebody could put up a sign that says, we do X, right? Whether it's an accounting firm, a law firm, a financial advisory practice, a beauty shop, right?
Right.
And it all sounds the same, but it's really not. And one of the things that I've noticed as the sport's gotten more popular, more people are getting into it, and oftentimes when that happens, things kind of water down, right? And I say this in the sense that when everyone's using the same words, everybody thinks it's the same. The bigger it gets, you know, what's that old saying? The farther you go outside of the circle, the product doesn't become as good anymore. So you look at like in the food business, the food business that has multiple stores but has a common commissary, they're more consistent with their product, right? Mm-hmm. And you see this with franchises all the time. So talk to us a little bit about the growth of Jiu-Jitsu over the last, going on 30 years now, but really, it's really taken off over the last 15 years or so where, I mean, it's just schools popping up left and right. Tell us a little bit about there.
And the promotion that I gave him on the beginning, I'm going to have to take it back because it's becoming controversial. He threw me to the wolves. I will come back leading the pack. Anyway, yeah, with everything that started high demand and high popularity, it happens an erosion of standards. If people become greedy, greed is ingrained in our society nowadays. So erosion of standards. So at the same time that it's good to offer Jiu-Jitsu and at least some of the benefits to as many people as we can, there is a problem right now of erosion of standards and I mean, watering down of jiu-jitsu. And I was very blessed to learn from the source, and I did the entire instructor program the way it was originally developed, you know, to be there, almost like a medical residence. I had to spend 12 hours every day with my teachers. So nowadays we see franchises and we see many people learning jiu-jitsu incompletely. Let me use this word to be kind and soft. You know, incompletely. So let's just think about this. You're at home, rainy day. You think about ordering a pizza, okay? And you order a large pizza, okay? The person come to your house with the large pizza box. You pay the person, you say thank you, you give a tip. You put the pizza box on your coffee table, on your dinner table. You open, there's only one slice. Are you going to be happy?
No.
Same here. That's what's happening right now. So a lot of the so-called Gracie Jiu-Jitsu schools only offer the sport Jiu-Jitsu. So all the traits, all the martial arts mindset that we're talking about, the way of life, many times are left out. And sometimes because even the instructor who is teaching became a victim of it. So I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but if you learn from somebody who learned, from somebody who learned, from somebody who learned half, you learn 1/3 maybe.
Right.
You know, so.
Yeah. So, you know, I remember as a kid growing up, you know, we would go to, you know, obviously jiu-jitsu wasn't prevalent in the US. There was, you know, karate was the big thing, you know.
Yeah.
Karate Kid, Cobra Kai, right? That was kind of our generation. And I remember those dojos, it was kind of like a temple. You know, there was a lot of respect. You walk in, you got to be quiet. There's people bowing, people dressed appropriately. And as I walk to these strip malls that I'm talking about, I see, you know, the way some of these folks are dressed. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, are these guys going to be giving discipline to my kids? You know, and it's kind of scary in a sense. And tying it back to, you know, the business, a lot of times, you know, business owners always chasing the dollar, right? We want to increase revenue, maximize profits. Short term, it might work, but long term, it creates problems, not just for, you know, obviously for the business owner, because long term customers are going to leave, but also customers, but the industry itself. And in our business, in the financial services world, you know, we always talk about the kid that pees in the pool, messes it up for everybody else. And we want to do a better job of policing our own industry. And I think every industry wants to as well, because if you want the industry to thrive for a long time, you got to have those checks and balances, right? And it's kind of police itself. So as you're looking at the landscape out there, you mentioned the original way was spending 12 hours as an apprentice with your teacher. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the original way of learning jiu-jitsu was private lessons, right? Not group lessons.
Yes, that's the original way. And to become an instructor, you have to spend a lot of time for years. Number one, invitation only. The teacher, the main teacher, would see or not your credits to become an instructor, invite you for an instructor course. And there's a term in Japanese that's called uchideshi. Uchideshi is the internal student. It's the one who spends time and does whatever the teacher asks. And in many cases, in the old days, the student would live at the dojo, sleep. In my case, it was a modern day uchideshi. I would go home just to sleep and eat, wake up and do it again. Go home, sleep. Modern time uchideshi. So you are learning all the things that we're talking about, and this cannot be learned only online. This cannot be learned only being a regular student that goes twice a week for an hour and a half. It's a completely different. So, and if you don't learn all of those things, I believe integrity and moral courage, because we all like money. So there's no, I like money. If I'm doing if I keep preserving my art and honoring my art and I make more money, I'm all about it. Thank you, great. Mm-hmm. But I'm not willing to compromise those values to make more money. And we know that people are different, and we live in a society with a lot of greed nowadays. And I see myself as a guy who even though I own a business, somehow I'm a businessman, but I never forgot being a martial artist. So those things go together. So I don't want to be sitting at our office without my uniform, without having contact with a child, without understanding psychologically what is the mental state of the child. Because one thing that Helio Gracie always said, if you want to be an okay teacher, you teach what you're good at. If you want to be a great teacher, you get into each one of the students, find out what he or she needs, and teach them what they need. And for that, you need long-term relationship. You need to learn. So I have interest. I know every single name of every single one of my students. 100 kids, we know every single one by the name. So when I see franchise and dojos where they write their kid's name on the uniform, I don't like it. Why? Because how am I going to do for the child or for the student what they really need, and I don't even know their name?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because at the end of the day, one of the things that every business owner strives for is customer loyalty, right? And if you're treating your customers as just another number, it's only a matter of time before they treat you as just a vendor. And you know, you were talking about how you want to learn everything about the kids or about your students so that you could give them exactly what's in it, you know, what they need. And oftentimes, you know, a business, when they're chasing profits, they don't want to spend the time or the investment initially because they want there's so much pressure on making money now that they miss out on that. So some of the parallels that I'm hearing you talk about is, you know, just like the modern day warrior, you're putting in that time, you're putting in the effort, you're making that initial investment because it's going to come back to you tenfold later on. And so talk to us a little bit about how, you know, when you're doing the right things, you tend to sleep better at night. And if you're running a business and you're always trying to take shortcuts, or you're not investing the time to put in the effort, the investment in your own time, even though it's not paying now, it's going to pay later in the future, but you want that instant result now, you're constantly running and chasing, and you never get to that point where, you know, things are, I don't want to say autopilot, Jack, but I don't know what the word is, but, you know, you're in control, right?
I say in command.
You're in command. That's a very good way of putting it. So when we go back to COVID days and you had this challenge, you never, you know, you weren't in fear at all, right? You kind of knew, okay, this is another challenge and we're going to get out of it. And when you think about what a business owner goes through with trying times, what are some habits that you think as a business owner, if you want to be your best, that you got to do in your off time or when you're not at work? What are some rituals that you think that are similar to the warrior spirit that someone has to go through or should go through to prepare themselves to deal with challenges like COVID and uncertainties?
Number one, you have to, in my opinion, you have to know who you are, what you stand for. So what is bendable and what is not bendable for you. So I feel like integrity, moral courage, all those traits play a big role on those things, because I know very well, I had a time here living in Sugar Land. One big businessman came to me and said, let's do this. I got your back. Let's open a school in Woodlands, one in Cypress, one in Katy, one in Pearland, and let's lock the entire city. I said, no, thank you very much. I'm happy the way I am. Because I will lose doing what I love. So I know who I am. I know what I stand for. I know what I strive. And I want to be a martial artist. And if that leads in the correct way eventually to have many schools, I have nothing against it. But that takes time to train the right people, to find the right people, train them correctly, make sure they offer service that's based on excellence, integrity and excellence. So I'm not willing to compromise those things just to make more money and compromise the values and the service.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about physical health. Okay, so we've been talking about, you know, a lot of, you know, mental things like how to think and how to feel. But, you know, in martial arts, just like running a business, if we're not healthy, we're not running a business. So health, physical health, obviously emotional health, mental health are important, but physical health. And I've heard you talk before in your classes, asking kids, are you eating healthy? Are you eating junk food? What are you eating? Tell us a little bit about, the physical aspects of the modern day warrior. What are some things that you do from a physical standpoint to be your best every day?
Yeah, so simple, basic things for everybody. Hydration, sleep. One thing that people overlook a lot, sunlight, walking. There's this term that I don't like nowadays, go hard or go home. I disagree with this. Just go. Moderation. Because if you guys call me now, let's do 100 sprints up on the stairs in the tower. Tomorrow, don't walk. So it's not sustainable. If you say, guys, let's go for 20 minutes walk in our own pace. Tomorrow I say, Jack, I had a great time. Let's do it again. And that's how you build a habit. So moderation and basics. You don't go for a walk if you're not hydrated. You don't perform well if you don't have good sleep. If you eat, for example, dessert, or let's call junk food or dessert, if that becomes the primary part of your diet, you're in trouble. If 85% of what you eat is good, and 15% once in a while you have a little ice cream, you have a little chocolate, okay. However, if you flip this, 85% of the time is dessert, chocolate, and the other one good food, you're in trouble. So that's like treating the car like an engine. You have to have the coolant, you have to have the oil, you have to have the right fuel. If you put the oil where it's supposed to be the gas where it's supposed to be the oil, or you put water where it's supposed, it's not going to operate well. So basic things, more than 85% of people who suffer from depression, vitamin D deficient. Simple sunlight exposure, which also help to be grounded, to be present, to contemplate nature. So it has to do body, mind, spirit. Has to do the physical, primal movements. People, nowadays, if you say, Leo, I'm going to buy a membership at CrossFit. Say, I'm not ready because I have an injury. I have an injury in my back, so I'm working on my injury right now. How about stretching primal movements without weight? Because increase your mobility, and you get range of motion, and you strengthen your core, you get, so it's excellent. So moderation, you don't build a habit going hard or going home. So start slowly, build, but again, walking, hydration, good diet, good sleep. And then when walking doesn't challenge you anymore, jog a little bit. Bike ride is something amazing. Because you're in the moment, life goes slower, quote slower. And you're in the moment, enjoying, you're feeling the breeze, you're feeling the sunlight, you connect with people, you move around, you contemplate nature. So a lot of things are accessible to us, we're overlooking, and we're becoming a sick society. I guarantee you for those things I will just talk about it, proper hydration, proper sleep, sunlight, walking, bike ride, only 5 things. For who does not do any of those 5, their life will be transformed, I guarantee it.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a question about training. So a lot of business owners, way we relieve stress is we want to do something physical, whether it's lifting weights, going to the gym. And all of us, and I'll speak for me at least, Jack, as a middle-aged man, I can't believe I'm referring to myself as a middle-aged man. We kind of don't want to let go of our youth. And we think we're still young, but we're not. But and I know a lot of famous people who are at the peak of their game, they train jiu-jitsu still. So there's the comedian Russell Peters. He's talked about how he does jiu-jitsu. Obviously, Joe Rogan podcast, he talks about his jiu-jitsu. What do you say to the middle-aged guy, 45 and above, that says, I'm too old to do jiu-jitsu?
I'm not going to only say it, but I'm going to challenge both of you. If you start training jiu-jitsu right now, correctly, for example, if you start training jiu-jitsu with me, in 5 years from now, I guarantee you feel younger than now. Why? Because I feel like by training jiu-jitsu correctly, you unlock your full potential. So things that you already have within you, I'm awakening the warrior within you. So you get to know about leverage. So things that you think you cannot do it, you can do it. You just have to awaken the ability, leverage and proper angles. So think about your car and a flat tire. Okay, so you don't, if you in a good day, you don't try to lift your car to change the tire. You go to the trunk and you get a little tool that's 100 times smaller than your car, put it in the right place, and you lift the car with the jack.
Yeah. No pun intended.
The jack does the job for you effortlessly. You can do it. What you using the proper tool, using the right principle, right positioning, proper angle, done. Same with jiu-jitsu. So you start to understand that you're the jack. You're able to lift, you're able to hold much more. So you start to unlock in principle that you're already doing things that you thought you could not do it, awakening the warrior within by leverage, weight distribution, timing, proper reflexes, proper positioning, proper angles. You're going to be younger than now. You're going to feel like, man, I did not know. I'm a quote, a monster, but I haven't been using this. It's like you're a 12-cylinder Ferrari operating 3-cylinder. So you guys have already challenged. I want to train you guys for a month and we'll go from there. Just please promise you don't choke me.
Yeah, you mentioned doing it right. And I think it's so important to emphasize that because, you know, a lot of business owners, we want to do the right thing and we want to get the right coaching. We want to, you know, we want to improve our lives. We want to improve the business. And sometimes we don't know if what we're getting is right or wrong, right? And until you have that aha moment and you realize how you've been doing things the wrong way. And so what do you say to the business owner who says, look, I go to conferences, I listen to other experts, I do all these things, yet I'm not able to unlock my full potential. Something's still missing. And relating it back to jiu-jitsu, right? So a lot of folks out there doing jiu-jitsu, they think they're doing it the right way. And some of them may not ever see that aha moment, right? How does somebody go about assessing the gaps that they have? How do you do it in jiu-jitsu and how can somebody relate that in a business world?
Yeah, so I feel like striving for excellence has to do with looking for the proper information. So doing your homework. When I started to do jiu-jitsu, I wanted to do it the best place. If I want to do swimming, I want to do it the best place. If I want to do it, so doing my homework. And also making sure that what is being sold is really what you're feeling. So you have to feel, you have to question. Jiu-jitsu nowadays, people say, oh, leverage. If you go every jiu-jitsu school website, they talk about leverage. When you see the guy training, does that translate? Or they're just going at each other with brute strength? Most now, many of the schools, if you guys go train at your age, it's not for you. Why? Explosiveness, physical, brute strength, injuries. But if you train at the school, the correct school, the right way, which I will train you guys, by the way, you learn to unlock the full potential using already what you have in proportional, and the growth comes proportion to your possibilities and your limitations and at the right time. So that's what I think about it.
Yeah, and I think that's so apropos what you said about go at your own pace, right? Oftentimes, you know, we've grown up in business to always compete, which of course it's a competition, but I think sometimes we're competing, our competition's the wrong person. We should be good.
And look for the right person. You want to do financial advising. You want to look for an attorney. You do your homework. You don't want to save $20, $2,000, whatever. You save, but you don't get it done right.
Right.
You do it. So make sure you go to the right person, the one that strives for excellence, that does this for a living the right way, that has integrity, moral courage, strive for excellence. Have to do your research.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about a few things, but one thing that came to mind was you know, it's easy, and especially in our advising business, to try to to say what the client wants to hear. I know they want to hear this, and then having the moral courage or integrity to know to tell them what they need to hear as opposed to what they want to hear. And I think and that's a lot of the difference between a good advisor and a bad advisor. It's sometimes easy to say that, oh, this is what they want to hear. Let me just tell them what they want to hear, and then they'll be happy and they'll pay me my fee. But they're not hiring us to do that. They're hiring us for us to tell them what they need to hear, to protect them, to make them wealthier, to make them healthier, to make them happier.
Yeah, I mean, there's this great responsibility that's placed on us, those of us that are in the advisory business, that are as teachers, as educators, as somebody that's passing. No, we're in the knowledge business. We're sharing our knowledge, and I think that responsibility, as you've demonstrated, is it's not something to be taken lightly. You can't just say you have it and dispense it, but not live it. And so the lesson that I'm taking away from this is, if you want to be, if you want to be a modern day warrior in its truest term, you have to live it every day. It's not just something you read once and you say, okay, that's the way it is. Every single day you have to do it. So if I'm going to be telling somebody, hey, you need to have discipline, well, I should start with myself. Do I wake up in the morning? What do I do? If I'm not doing my push-ups, if I'm not drinking water, but instead I'm waking up late because I went to bed late and I'm just grabbing coffee to wake me up, I'm in no position to teach somebody else. And we talk about, as a teacher, as modeling, right? We want to model the way we live things. And with jiu-jitsu, with kids, full disclosure, my children are in jiu-jitsu, right? Because I want them to have that warrior mentality. But one of the things that's important to me is, kids, they don't learn the same way that adults learn. The way adults learn is we hear something, we write it down. Let's say we have the ability to remember it. Kids, they model after, they do a lot of modeling, like the way you watch how their parents act. I mean, how many times have you told your kids don't do this and they still do it, right?
Yeah, all the time.
All the time, right? I think everybody could relate to that. But when your kids watch how you act, that's how they act. So, if I hear my kids yelling at each other, I'm like, oh, was I yelling? That's the first thought that comes to my head, because they're just going to be modeling. So we're talking about jiu-jitsu, kids going there. If they're watching their instructors leading the right lifestyle, they're healthy, they're doing the right things, that's where I want my kids to be. I don't want them to be with the instructor who's, not well groomed, smells like, I'm going to say this, I don't want to get in trouble, but, I've been at places where I've walked by and the instructors, smells like marijuana, right? I don't want my kids there.
Yeah,
that's not and so tying back to business, if we're doing the right things, we're modeling it the right way, our clients are going to be our advocates. They're going to go tell everybody else, hey, if I don't tell you about Jack's services or Avo's services, then I'm doing you a disservice, right? And so I think the takeaway for me is live the life every day. Live the lifestyle.
Yes.
Yeah. So Jack, are you at this point motivated to go and start doing some jiu-jitsu?
You opened me to the possibility.
Excellent.
Yeah. And
let's do this.
Yeah. So anything else you'd like to add?
No, just want to thank you guys and congratulate you for being modern day warriors on your business, on your field. And that's it. I'm proud and happy and grateful to be here with you guys. And let's maybe in the future do another one. After you guys choke me.
That's well, I think what our audience wants to see is, can you put Jack to sleep with a chokehold?
Oh, that would be easy.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jack? Are you up for it? You'll only be out for like 2 seconds.
Oh, like 2 seconds? Huh? Oh, okay.
But you gotta sign some waivers though.
Yeah.
Information contained in this podcast and accompanying video have been derived from sources believed to be reliable. This content is not guaranteed as to its accuracy and does not purport to be a complete analysis of the topics discussed. Analysis is based on assumptions that may not come to pass. None of the content should be construed as legal or investment advice. You should consult with a qualified professional before implementing any strategies discussed. All expressions of opinion reflect the judgment of the speakers on the date the video was recorded and are subject to change.